Hello, Crossroads witches and other interesting magical beings. As you can tell, here is another interesting people video that I'm getting to do today. I am with Dave Gaddy, who wrote the book that we were just talking about so much. This is so amazing. The Simple Magic of Wild Things. It's like where magic comes from is sort of what it should be called, Dave. Just a simple, but at the same time, it's so profound. Hello, Dave. How are you doing today? Would you like to give a
Hello.
little intro about yourself?
Sure, I'm doing great. My name is Dave Gaddy. I currently live in Atlanta, but was raised in North Carolina, and I've lived in Tennessee, North Carolina, even New York City. My practice is a mix of folk magic, traditional craft, um, even some of the influence of the Gullah people, just based on the location that I was raised in and things like that. So I'm just a country boy at heart, and what you see is what you get with me.
Oh, I love it. We were getting to chat a little bit, talking about the fact that, I mean, where I live, my neighbor is Gullah. I'm here right on the Sea Islands. I'm on John's Island outside of Charleston, and how that really is that Gullah corridor, but also how much the Gullah went inland all the way into the Appalachia. You know, we often don't think about that, how that influence permeated pretty much
Mhm.
so many parts of the South, where it's just not here on the Sea Islands. That was one of the things that I loved in your book when you brought up the haint, you know,
Oh yeah.
and how it, by the time it got to the mountains, because for us down here, a haint is an entity. A
Hmm.
haint's got a whole story to it. All right. And there are things that haints do, and there are things that haints don't. You take the idea of having haints around quite seriously, but by the time it had gotten out to the mountains, it sort of was just used as an overview of ghost or spirits.
Exactly.
You had lost a lot of the nuances of the mythology, but kept that core component to
Right.
it.
And it also kept that foreboding presence, because it was something you didn't want to invite into the house. And constantly, all I heard growing up was make sure that the porch is painted, the roof of the porch is painted paint blue. And I'm like, oh my stars. Okay, I get it. I'm listening.
And because I can remember like bottle trees being around
Hmm.
in my youth, and not even thinking about that. That was sort of normal. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I left the region that it like I really that like other people don't do that.
Hmm.
Because when you're in the bubble, you're thinking everybody does it. And then again, this is something that you see, you will see bottle trees all the way up into the foothills, the edge of the Appalachia as well.
Hmm.
This is something else as a way to catch spirits, you know, evil spirits, things like that. You know, there's so many commonalities when we talk about the regional folk magic. I mean, because
Hmm.
the one thing with any type of folk magic system is we're dealing with that bioregionalism.
Hmm.
But at the same time, listening to you talk about your area when you were talking about like, dirt roads.
Oh yes.
I just loved that. I live down a dirt road, by the way, so I really get dirt roads.
Oh yeah.
There's something magical about them.
And
Um,
I'm
can,
so not a city witch, so I miss the dirt roads. I miss the country. Atlanta is, you have to be creative to find your wild places.
I can imagine, and that's where you have to learn to embrace the urban environment and
Hmm.
learn to look at the cracks between the sidewalks
Hmm.
and learn to look, you know, around you to find your magic. It's
And I'm
it,
lucky. I do have a patch of woods behind the condos that I live in, so I get to escape out there quite a bit.
right, you know, but it definitely is nothing. There's nothing, it's like there's nothing like standing on the edge of the ocean. There's nothing like
Hmm.
standing on in the wildwood. There's nothing like standing in the desert or standing up in the mountains.
Hmm.
These each of these unique regional places have their own energy, their own vibe. What is it? Their own
Exactly.
genie loci. Um, and some of us magic folks are lucky enough to live in the regions that we really vibe in. But the reality is, a lot of us live where we have to because of society. So at heart, you might be a mountain witch, but you're, you know, far away, or you're, you know, ocean, or like you said, the dirt roads. But the reality of life right now can't be there. So you have to find other creative ways to satisfy that. What is
Hmm.
recharge?
Exactly.
You know, that was part of the appeal. We just moved here over a year ago. This property
Hmm.
was, when we found out that it was down a dirt road, I was like, and then I found out that it backs up to a graveyard, and I was like,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, where I'm like, do we have to pay extra?
Well, and see, that's what's so funny because my grandmother that I talk about in the book actually lived down the hill from a graveyard. So one of the things my mother always wondered why I never drank water out of the spigot when we went over there. And I'm like, I'm not drinking Uncle Hugh or Aunt Bessie. And she's like, what? I said, Mama lives downhill from a graveyard. I said, you think that don't come into the well water? And she's like, I never thought about that. So after the fact, my mother never drank water either or used ice.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Thank goodness ours is a field away from us, and not downhill from it.
Oh, this was like right like yards
Yeah.
downhill. I mean,
Oh,
like she
I
was downhill and the graveyard was right up here.
right, right. Oh my goodness. You know, that was one of the things that I did really enjoy was your book is what when we talk about passing the magic, passing the knowledge to the next generation,
Hmm.
it's always been done in storytelling.
Hmm.
And through the telling of stories is where you find those in between threads and strands of worldly wisdom, of practical knowledge, and also of magic.
Hmm.
And you know, it's like I was Thula, your great
Great
two great
grandmother. Uh,
grandmother,
third grade. Yeah.
third grade. I was like, there. I know there's a couple greats in there. I don't want to sit here and, like, you know, give away everything in the book, because I would like folks to go get a copy of this book, because I just can't recommend it enough. I was, you know, telling the story for me was I had already purchased the book, and I was talking about the book to other people when Dave had put out there, you know, that he was looking to see if anybody was looking for someone to interview, someone to have on their, you know, uh, any content creators. And I was like, oh, no way. It was like the universe lined up. And what I was talking about, and I do want to talk about a little, is chapter 5.
Yes.
And chapter 5 is the mental health chapter, which is another interesting magical beings. And it was so refreshing. It was so honest, and practical, down to earth, with the reality of our community and how important mental health is. And, coming from a time period with the emergence of paganism, the emergence of early Wicca, where they talked about, you can't have mental health issues and do magic. And it left a stigma because we have books out that still say that. You get into the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s that will, oh, you can't be taking medications. Oh, you shouldn't be going to a therapist, and unfortunately, these people for their time period didn't know any better. We can't. I'm not trying to throw shade on them, but we know better now.
Yes.
And
dealing with mental health issues does not make you less of a witch. It does not diminish your power. That's the one thing that I would say more than anything. It does not. When I taught at Mystic South, one of the people in the class asked, because they were on antipsychotics, and they're like, does that keep you from being magical? No. I think honestly, it helps you to be more magical because it helps to line up your mind, your feelings, your emotions, so that you can focus a little bit more, so that you can grasp what you're looking to. Because if you think about it, when we're at our worst mentally, you're not functional at all. How are you going to do magic if you can't focus, if you can't function? I mean, a lot of what I talk about with mental health issues is get the help that you need, because there's nothing wrong. And the 4 M's we talked about: mediation, medication, meditation, and magic. All 4 of them have a place in our practice. All 4 of them have a place in our mental health. Do I do workings for depression, for anxiety? Yes, I do workings for them. Do I take medications for them? Yes, I take medications for them, because you do not want to see me without those medications. I'm a beast. So you do what makes the magic happen stronger. And that's one of the things that is a huge thing for me. Do the work. No matter what you're doing, do the work. I see a lot of new practitioners that want it handed to them on a plate. No, go out and do the work. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've been in the dirt. I've gotten my hands dirty. I've done things that have been wrong. I've done things that have been right. I've done things that have been ugly and things that have been incredible. And it's all by trial and error. It's all by getting in there and doing the work. And it's the same thing with your mental health. You can't just sit in a magical bubble and wish it away. I mean, you can, but it's probably not going to accomplish everything that you need accomplished. Because, with me, the big thing for me is, and I hate using the word victim, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. That was a huge thing as far as the depression, the anxiety. And I had to be put under sodium pentothal, truth serum, in order to pull it out. So for me to be able to talk about it now is a huge boost to my own magic, because I called back my power on that.
Right. You spoke, yeah.
I gave myself that authority, that magic back, because the minute that something comes out, it either increases the power or diminishes the power. When I say I'm a survivor of sexual abuse rather than a victim of sexual abuse, it puts power in me, not in the abuser.
Words have so much power. And learning to use our words wisely. A lot of times, a lot of us, we're saying things and it's like we're not even hearing ourselves. We're whatever. If somebody's like, oh, you're a victim, and you're like, yeah, I'm a victim. I'm a victim. And you're not thinking what you're saying about yourself. And it becomes that, self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating, that continuation, because you keep putting that back on yourself. and you don't even understand you're doing it.
Well, and think about it. It
And
comes along the lines of intent.
and to have these honest conversations with folks, I think a lot of new folks feel like somehow they're not worthy, they're not good enough, they don't know enough, or whatever. Somehow it's up lacking,
Mm-hmm.
and then put any type of dealing with any of the mental health issues on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
It can, downright put you into a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
And saying these things out loud, like you said, when I say it out loud, it's either going, it's going to add to my power, or it's going to diminish whatever needed to be
Mm-hmm.
diminishing, and how important that is. And it was so amazing. And the chapter, I've been telling folks, I'm like, I think that's a must read for all magical practitioners. It's very concise. It's well written. There's a lot of really inspiring, encouraging words in there. And also, I love that at the end of each chapter, there is a getting in the dirt. You were talking about, I've done
Mm-hmm.
the workings, I've done these things. At the end of each of the chapters, you give practical advice on, hey, this is how you can do this. Here's a ritual, here's a spell. And at the end of the book, there's a list of some of your incense and potions, in which
Mm-hmm.
I read through those because I love a good herbal incense blend. So I was in there just looking, and I was like, ooh, I love the blends. There's a couple I put little stars by because I want to try it. I want to use your recipe too, Dave.
Go for it. My
Where
favorite one is the one that uses bacon grease as a base.
Oh, is that not too funny? Because you want to know? I think I wrote that down as it's page 162. Let me see here. That my favorite of your, yeah, actually, and look, and say I have stars right beside it.
Yep.
And that is your deep fried and dirt grim candle dressing oil.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read through it, I thought it was brilliant. I loved so much of the ingredients were actually things I could get in my backyard. Um,
Exactly. And that's a lot of what I do. I use things that I've got access to. And I
and
think that's the resourcefulness that my grandmother taught me.
I loved it. It was good, practical. And you have a poem in there that I also, your poem on home.
Mm-hmm.
You wrote, I found to it was beautiful. It invoked emotion within me. Sounds like a good critic, don't I? Um, but it was just so beautiful, and that all those little bits and pieces wrapped around these stories of your own personal journey, your journey with your ancestors, connecting to your own dirt, and that it was a journey. You said earlier, so many witches want it handed on a plate. Here, do
Mm-hmm.
these 5 things and it's all going to work out. And that's not how it works. I'm like you. I've been in community for many decades now, and I'm still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And your other chapter that I really love is chapter 7, which is your words of encouragement, and how we were talking earlier, how the power of words, how not only we talk to others, but how we talk to ourselves,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
and how much magic we're brewing, either good or bad, on ourselves. And again, I loved the fact that you dedicated an entire chapter on words of encouragement, and how so much of the little simple things, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
just saying good job.
Well, and
uh
that's just it. One of the huge things for me is I don't have time to be petty.
mm,
I don't have time to pick apart somebody else's practice. That's their practice. They know what they're doing. I'm going to trust that they know what they're doing. It's my job as a practitioner to make sure that you succeed as much as I succeed, to make sure that you have as strong a magic as you can have. Because in doing that, you're putting things out there. It's just like if I encourage you, you're going to encourage somebody else. And I don't have time for witch wars.
I can't keep up with
I
it.
can't
I
either, and I don't try.
occasionally somebody says something and I'm like, what? You know,
Exactly. Um, and we all make mistakes. I mean, we take somebody else's word about somebody else, and rumors start and all kinds of stuff
oh
like that.
gosh.
I've tried my best over the past year, especially even the past couple years, to eliminate that. Um, just because everybody deserves that. What's the word I'm looking for? That
Grace.
that grace. Yes, yeah. Everybody deserves
The
that grace,
that
even
we
yourself.
that we recognize that everybody has a story behind them, and that
Hmm.
some of their stories are pretty damn traumatic, and that in
Hmm.
reality that this person is doing the best that they can in this moment.
Exactly.
And sorry, it didn't reach your approval, it didn't reach your expectation. Whatever you're judging it on, it's not satisfying. But you're not taking that moment to hear this person's entirety of self.
Hmm.
You know, it's like you said, rumors, yeah. In community, sometimes my attitude is to back out of the room slowly and just leave and go away. Like you said, I don't get involved. I refuse to touch the spoon if the cauldron's bubbling the bad way. I'm a believer that you can't touch that spoon, even if you're trying to say you're doing it with good intentions. Oh, I'm just going to smooth everyone over. No, you're not. As soon as you touch the spoon, you got ick on you. Just
Hmm.
keep your mouth shut, back out of the room, go find a room in which folks are sitting there uplifting people, and which are saying good things about each other. I'm a believer that you can tell the character of a person by what they say after someone's left the room.
Exactly.
Are they talking
Exactly.
shit about them? Are they saying kind words about them?
Exactly. And that.
Because if they're talking shit about that person, guess what they're going to say when you leave the room?
Hmm. And that. And you mentioned backing out of the room. I'm also at a point in my life that I will tell you, I'm not comfortable with this conversation. Let's stop it. We can go somewhere. We can talk about something else, but I'm not doing this. And yes, I mean, it could be just maturity or old age. You can call it what you want, but I've just gotten to the point that it's not worth my energy.
Yeah,
It just,
I respect where you're at, Dave. I respect, because I mean, I'm 60, and that I do have the points where I'm like, I don't want to discuss this. I
well,
have nothing to say. It's not my
mhm,
business to discuss, or, I'm not comfortable sitting here listening to people talk about other people who aren't in the room.
right.
All
And
right.
if you think about what we talked about earlier, calling your power back to you, every day, something chips away at that power,
Mm.
whether it be our own self-talk, whether it be somebody else. We have to call that power back every morning, every day, just because the day in itself will knock you for a loop.
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. You know, and a lot of us, like you're saying, we're in situations where we are getting those little nibbles of our
Hmm.
power getting taken away from us, and being aware of it.
Hmm.
And I'm going to segue into my other favorite chapter, and which was chapter 13, and that was reigniting the flames.
Hmm.
And you in that chapter wrote a sentence on, that our practice, our magic is not linear, and that we have ebbs and flows in
Hmm.
it. And just by recognizing that releases so much of that sense of unworthiness, that sense of, uh, almost, the negative self-talk, was understanding that you're not always going to be every year. I often talk about the fact that not every year is the year to dance around a Beltane pole and have a party. Some years
Hmm.
it's great, and other years I just want to sit quietly on my porch, and that I'm allowed to have both.
Hmm. I mean, if you look at it that way, even not even year, but daily. I mean, if you think about it, we have good days and we have bad days. I mean, I'm that way at work. I'm that way with my private life. I'm that way with my practice. There are days that I don't feel magical. There are days that I just feel like a slug. And it's okay to have those days. And that's just it. People they're so hard on themselves. They're like, well, I haven't practiced in this amount of time. Okay, just start. I mean, it's that simple. Just start. Don't beat yourself up about the past. Just start. And
That's
that,
funny you say that, because I too have people that will say that to me.
mhm,
They're so self-critical of their own practice. It hasn't reached some sort of expectation beyond reality, because I'm like, nobody does that, or at least as far as nobody I know does that. Let me
mhm.
rephrase it. We're not all witchy 24/7 running
No.
around with incantations coming out of our mouths. Like you said, some days just getting up, getting to the couch, brushing your teeth, and you're like, I'm good.
Exactly. I mean, it's just like I work with my job, my mundane job is payroll support software, or I do payroll software support. Trust me, there are days I do that. I do not feel magical at all. I mean, that is all about punching a button and getting it to work. But the thing is, that's when I need to get away, go out into the woods, or I've got a Shakti mat that I use, well, an old acupressure mat, and I use that when I'm feeling particularly stressed or whatever. But there are ways that you have to manage it. I mean, you're not only managing your magic, you're managing your life.
It's all
And
connected.
yeah, it's all about, and you hear a lot of talk about self-care now. I want to take it to a different point. Let's do mental self-care.
Mm.
That means when you catch yourself speaking negatively about yourself, stop it. Think of something better. Think of the good that you've accomplished. Think of the good that you've seen. And that's one of the things when you were talking about the chapter on ignite and igniting the flame. Remember why you fell in love with the craft to start with. It's easy to practice for 30 years and forget what started it. And that's one of the things that I tell people. Remember what made you fall in love. I mean, think about it. When you have a partner, when you have a husband, a wife, love becomes a mindset. It becomes something that you have to do purposefully. And it can be the same thing with our magical path. We all get caught up in life. We all forget what ignited that flame to begin with. But if we purposely set out to fan that flame on a daily basis, to remember what started it, to even as much as say, okay, I'm not feeling particularly magical right now. What can I do to make that happen? Because if you think about it, we are the manifestation of what we do. I mean, it's all going to start here. And if we manifest what we're looking to accomplish, then that's what's going to show through.
Absolutely. I love it. I'm like sitting here just nodding my head, because I mean, I just agree with everything. I often talk about it. Uh, you know, that it's not every full moon is meant to dance under, be in tune with yourself, and everything you were talking about. This is what that next generation, what those folks in which are looking for beyond the books. This is what it's about. It's about first starting with yourself.
And one thing that I would highlight there is be authentic.
Yes.
Don't put forth a persona that you think people want to see. When I started writing, that was the big thing. I'm not one of these high magic, overly intellectual writers. I tell stories. That's who I am. If I were to try to do the other one, it would be a train wreck. But if I give my voice the opportunity to be heard, and that it's like I said, that's one thing that I stress. Be authentic. Be who you are. And you get me, warts and all.
And if you're not going to know who you are starting out, and that's okay. You can authentically be, I'm looking for authenticity. I mean, you can be in an active state of trying to figure, where is my authentic voice at? Because so many times society has taught us to have these masks on. And especially for any of us neurospicy folk, we've had masks on all of our lives because we're trying to fit in and blend in. And now all of a sudden you're saying, take all those masks off. And who's behind it? And for some folks, that's a very big journey. All right. And that's what you were talking earlier about, the 4 M's, that part of this journey is going to have to be you doing the work of finding out who you are and finding the best version of yourself. And then once you find that, even I would like to say, I know my authentic voice, but on a deeper level, I would tell you that it's a work in progress. I think we're always on the journey of knowing self. There isn't going to reach a point where you're like, all right, I get it, I'm done.
Exactly. And I think that's accurate as far as the craft goes too. We're always in a learning state. Yes. The minute we say we've learned it all, we're lying.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be a progression. And you're not going to be who you started out to be 30 years ago. It's just, and that's one of the chapters in the new book. It's called I Knew Who I Wanted to Be.
Oh, that's for all of you wonderful Crossroads, which is another interesting magical being. Dave has another book.
It should be coming out next summer. So
Dave has another book for her. And that's what he's talking about. What is the title of that book?
This one's called Be the Witch That You Are, Calling Back Your Magic. Or Calling Back Your Power. Yeah.
Be the witch that you are. So all of you folks need to be on the lookout for that. This is going further down that rabbit hole of self, really, where we're talking the mental health. And it doesn't mean you have to be spicy for mental health. Even, neurotypical, y'all need to know who you are just as much.
And that's a lot of what this next book is about. It's learning to accept your authentic self, learning to be who you are, not necessarily. And my mentor was huge in this, and constantly I would get, be the witch that you are. For the love of God, be the witch that you are. Quit whining, just do it. And in the midst of that, you learn there's truth in that. It doesn't accomplish anything for me to try to be you. My background is different. My makeup is different. Everything that's made me who I am today is a different story altogether. And we were talking about Thula earlier. Thula is the family wild card because Thula had 8 kids, all by different dads, in the 1800s, and that was unheard of. She lived in a small town, but when she was approached with the fact that somebody needed to make an honest woman out of her, she came back with, I don't need a man to make me anything. She's like, my kids have food, my kids have clothes, my kids go to school. My kids don't lack for anything. And she's like, that's because of me and no man. And to know that I come from that kind of stock, I mean, like I said, she's the one that when I do my ancestral work, she'll be the one to come through with, okay, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, be about the task at hand.
That is so important for us having that sense of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for some of you interesting folks out there that you may not have access to this information within a bloodline of familiars where you are able to trace your family lines. That does not mean you're without ancestors. All right. And that you still can set up an altar to them, even if they're nameless. Over
Well,
time, they may reveal their name or they will start revealing their own characteristics.
and I also talk about one of the classes that I teach. There are different types of ancestors you can use. There are
Mm,
ancestors of the land. There are ancestors of community. I'm LGBTQ plus. Tons of ancestors in that community. Witchcraft community.
yes.
Mentors, teachers, things like that. Even cultural. My background is Scottish, so I can work with Scottish ancestors.
You can end up with a busy ass altar, is what we're
Exactly.
saying, bitches. Don't be
Exactly.
thinking just because I don't know who my great great grandma is that your altar is empty is what I just want. Because I know sometimes when we start talking ancestral altars, I've dealt with many practitioner who, for whatever reason, does not have that information. And I'm like you just said, there's a list that you can start going through. I mean, within my own tradition, we always call in the witches of the past who bid us well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Um, we're smart. We know not all witches bid us well. But we call in our ancestors, our witch ancestors, our brothers and sisters who stood in magical circles before us.
Right. And even along the lines of blood ancestry, you don't have to work with all of your ancestors. There are certain ones that I won't work with just because of the history there. Um,
That
I'm
is so
respectful.
true.
I'm
I'm,
respectful, but there are certain ones I just won't work with.
I'm so happy you brought that up because, yes, you don't have to put them on your altar. It's your altar. You get to include who you choose to work with. All right. And you do have ancestors that want to work with you. And you may have ancestors that are 3 or 4 generations away from you that you don't have a physical story to.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you still can't work with them and
Mm-hmm.
learn their story through the experiences that they have with you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's a journey. It takes time. This is ongoing. You know, what Dave and I are talking about is basically 2 old witches who've done this a while. We have messed up. We have, realized that we were in the wrong room at the wrong time and we needed to get the hell out of there. Everything we're talking about, we've done.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
the big deal is that we got back up and learned better. We got back up and tried again. All right. And that's for all of you. All right. We were just like you when we were starting out. All right. I remember when I was a young witch, I wanted to overcomplicate everything. I felt that we
Mm-hmm.
needed to have an entire ritual for just all sorts of stuff within this giant ritual of something. Right? But I look back at myself and now I look at how my practice is so much more simple, but so much more meaningful and effective.
Mm-hmm.
Once I lost what I expected or what I thought others were doing and just started tuning into what was meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And you made that point in your book about how much time you had lost worried about what others were thinking about you.
Mm-hmm.
And it really resonated with me, and that was something I wanted to bring up with you, because I was like, I want the witches out there and other interesting beings to hear we've been there. That analysis paralysis, that sense of not good enough self, that sense of almost imposter syndrome, where you're standing in the room with the I don't belong here.
Mm-hmm. And trust me, my first conference, oh my gosh, I felt that so much. I'm like, because we have a phrase in the South called backwards.
Yeah.
And I felt so backwards in that setting because I'm like, I'm not a dynamic person. I don't bubble. I'm more introverted than extroverted. So to me, that was such a challenge, just putting myself out there, even to the point of writing the book, putting myself out there, because when you open that book, I'm laid out in front of you.
That's what I loved about your book, was the fact that it was your experience, but it was also a lot of good solid facts. It wasn't all just your personal gnosis, or your esoterical theories. This was practical knowledge that you laid out for a lot of witches, where they are looking for encouragement, they are looking for inspiration, empowerment, you know
Hmm.
um uh, you know you you put it out there. It was just like I said, thoroughly refreshing, and I still recommend that everyone needs to read chapter 5 on mental health. I'm so overhearing some of the bullshit that this community has bubbled over the idea of you can't be doing medications and magic. When I'm thinking about, really, did anybody tell that to the ancient Greeks when they were doing the ancient mystery rites? Because we know damn well they were putting some stuff in those cups.
Well, if you look at a lot of indigenous practices, I mean,
Yes, sir.
you have peyote, you have so many
I
things.
just did this on one of the Ulyssean temples, where they were able to get some shards of pottery, and which they believe was the drink, and have the experience of divinity in the temple. And there are trace elements of ergot. So it goes into further archaeology, anthropology, this little bubble of, we've got enough evidence now to say that they were growing varieties of wheat and barley, in particularly known for their ergot, which is this little byproduct thing. It's sort of like a mold, is how I would have to almost, but that's not really true. But that's what gave the psychedelic experience. It would have been similar to ayahuasca
Hmm.
would have been the experience that they would have had based on the chemical composition of these two, where they had experience with divinity. So, and the reasoning behind it, and even Aristotle drank the stuff and had an experience with divinity, and he wrote about it later, that it's about the quieting of the conscious so that the subconscious can thrive, that it's quieting our everyday so what's underneath us can survive. So if
And that's
medications,
huge. That's huge as far as medication with that,
right,
just
what you
because
were saying earlier
if
is
it
the exact
quiets
same thing Aristotle said.
exactly, if it quiets the mind enough so that the subconscious can work.
Right. And
And
that's what
that's just it. If you think about anxiety, if you think about depression, it's an overactive mind first and foremost. I mean, it's just like with me, panic attacks, oh my stars. I can take one little thing and walk around it 50 times. Okay, 50 times isn't enough, so I'm going to start running around it 50 more. So by the time that I've finished thinking about it, my brain is so tired and so wired at the same time that if I didn't take the medications I did, I don't know that I could function magically.
Right. And I wanted to bring that up because you had spoken earlier when you were talking. It was like note to self that if it's good enough for Aristotle, I don't know what the hell people are complaining about.
Hmm.
Where they talk, is this a new idea? No, the idea of quieting the mind so that you can have these mystical, these spiritual experiences with the divine goes back into the eons.
Hmm.
All right. And they also, they did acknowledge the out of balance of the body with depression, with anxiety, panic attacks. And they had some pretty cool herbal solutions for it. They were medicating back then.
Hmm.
All right. Where do you think the word pharmaceutica, pharmacy? Guess what? It comes from ancient Greek.
Well, and we can even go a little closer in. If you think about flying ointments,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, first of all, who would have thought about putting it on a broomstick and just riding that broomstick to heaven? Okay. But if you think about it, we've been doing that with herbals and ointments and potions for decades, centuries. I mean, you can't tell me that these little witches that lived on the edge of the forest weren't out there foraging for Amanita muscaria. I mean, you can't tell me that, or that they weren't out looking for something that they could smoke that might help them with a vision.
Most definitely, we have, the evidence that that was indeed what was happening, where we're finding within some of our shaman burials within indigenous folk, where we are looking at some of our ancient civilization within their priesthoods, within their burial area is some sort of mind altering substance that they're trying to
Hmm.
take to the other side with them. That's how much they
Hmm.
liked it. I mean, and for me, I'm 420 friendly, so I'm like, I can take it with me.
Yeah, same here. So,
Where
and,
I'm
well,
just like, yeah, I want to take it with me, put it in with me.
and let me clarify by saying I'm not a psychedelics. Uh, I don't know what you would call it. I'm not one of those people that knows everything about psychedelics. But as far as medications for anxiety and depression, I'm saying that if it helps your focus, if it helps you to be in the right place mentally, do what needs to be done. That's all I'm saying is do what needs to be done, do the work.
I talk a lot on this channel. I'm open about the fact that, I go to therapy. I am,
Hmm.
I'm atypical neurodivergent. I'm neurospicy. I'm on the spectrum, whatever phraseology you want to call me. And me having to learn to look at the world and understand things about it. When I was younger, we didn't have access to all the therapy. We didn't have access to a lot of the knowledge. We were just the weird kids in the room. And a lot of times, people don't realize this, where, I talk, some of the, I'm like, dude, they used to call us like socially retarded
Hmm.
or emotionally retarded, whatever the hell that means. They didn't even have adequate words for us other than we were those weird kids in the room. We were,
Hmm.
because typically, when you're dealing higher functioning, we're very, very intelligent people on paper. We just can't turn doorknobs sometimes. And if we get
Hmm.
into a room full of people, we don't understand what is going on around us. There's too much energy. We can't process every option that every person is presenting us, or at least for me personally, that's how I look at it. I'm just like, oh, this is
Well,
too much
and that's a good
information. I
and
have
that's
to
a
go
good
sit,
comparison. That's a good comparison.
you
If you
know.
think about it, we're all energy. Everything around us is energy. And on a daily basis, we're bombarded with a lot of energy. I mean, working in payroll, I get angry people all day long. And if you think about it,
That's
how do you deal with that? I essentially have to shut it off when I log off. And because of the medications that I'm on for anxiety, that helps me to shut that off. Now, if I weren't on that medication, what would I do? I would sit down after I got off work and I would think about every interaction I had that day over and over.
That rumination of thought. I
Mm-hmm.
don't, um, I don't, I get it within the OCD level of autism, but I don't have it as standing alone. So uh, I don't ruminate like that. I
Oh, I
understand what you're
will in a
saying.
heartbeat.
We're different, and that's what people need to understand is that we're all slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
We're a spectrum. That's what makes us so wonderfully interesting,
Exactly.
and how each of us are processing information and learning who you are and accepting it and not trying to, hide it, change it, but instead learning to embrace it and how to work with it. Like you were talking, you deal with depression, and that when you're having a bad day, instead of beating yourself up for that bad day, instead embracing it, allowing yourself to feel it, go through it, and then
Mm-hmm.
leave it,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to this cycle of beating yourself up for feeling depressed. You're depressed now that you feel depressed, that you're depressed, that you're beating yourself up for being depressed, that you're depressed, and you're depressing yourself more, where it becomes just this complete regurgitating cycle of self-loathing.
Exactly.
Where when we stop and learn to give ourselves a little bit of kindness, a little bit of grace, and really the biggest thing we need to learn to give ourselves is dignity.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have the right to feel these feelings, we have the right to process these emotions this way, and to never diminish it.
Right. And one thing that I've learned over the years is it's okay to visit those emotions. Don't live there.
I love that phrase. It's okay to visit. That's brilliant. That is, I
I
think, the
mean,
best
I
way to.
can visit the depression, I can acknowledge it, but if I let myself drown in it and live in that depression, then it's going to affect everything about me. It's going to affect my magic. It's going to affect my day-to-day life. And trust me, I've been there. I understand that. I mean, like I said in the book, I remember my mom coming into the room when I was having one of my worst depressive episodes. And she's like, I'm watching my rock crumble in front of me. And she's like, and I don't know how to help. And that point kind of kicked something inside me. But also, another little thing that happened in that same time period was I ended up going off of a bridge. We were having torrential rainstorms, and I had started to go across the bridge, realized that it was essentially white water, started to back up, and the water came in behind my tires and pulled the car out. So at that point, I had to make a decision. Did I want to live or did I want to give up? I crawled out of one of those tiny back windows onto the roof of the car, floated into a grove of trees, climbed into the top of the tree, and yelled for an hour. They finally came out with a boat because somebody a mile away heard me scream and pulled me out of that tree. So at that point, that's when I was like, okay, there's more to me than meets the eye. I'm stronger than I thought I was.
No shit. You did for real survivalist. I'm like,
Exactly.
where you were asking, do I want to live? How hard am I gonna
Exactly.
fight to live? Is what you
And
asked
that was and
yourself.
that was just it. I had to make a decision in that split second. How much fight do you have in you, or do you just want to give up and sleep?
Wow, Dave, that is. I'm so grateful you're telling these stories, because I think there's a lot of other folks out there who feel like they're the only one in the room that's going through things that are similar, going through things that you can relate to, and that we need these stories to be told. You
Well,
know,
because so many that deal with these emotions feel like it makes them less witchy.
And
And
in
it doesn't.
reality, it makes you more witchy.
Exactly. Exactly. Think of the power that comes from conquering your own emotions. Think about the power that comes from overcoming who you are to become a better person.
It is such a journey of just self-discovery. I really credit witchcraft with helping me on my own path, and so
Hmm.
grateful that it's been a part of my path, because I wouldn't be where I am with understanding me, and how I
Exactly.
relate to me, my sense of self, because I've had my own traumas in my life that have put me to my knees a couple of times, and having to make, like you said, that decision: how much do I want this?
Hmm.
And the will to rise back up and to, face yourself honestly and work through it. And it's constant. That's the one thing I think I with our young practitioners, is that all I have to do is these three things, and it'll be, and I'm like, no, honey, we're still working on it.
Hmm. And I think you said something that was really potent there. You learn to face yourself. So
Yes.
many times that look in the mirror is the hardest part because we see what we want to be, we see who we want to be, but we don't see the way to become that. And if we only realize that looking in the mirror is a starting point.
Ooh, that's like, write it on a t-shirt.
It's true.
That
If
is
you
like,
look,
put it on a poster. Looking in the mirror is the starting point, because that's so
well, because if you think about it, when I look in the mirror, and I'll give this example. I had weight loss surgery back in 2019. I had the gastric sleeve done. And the doctor told me when I had this, he's like, after this surgery, you're always going to have fat brain. And I'm like, huh? He's like, you're always going to have fat brain. You're going to look in the mirror and you're going to see yourself at 400 pounds, even though you're 190 something. He's like, you're going to look at a space between two cars and think that you can't go between those because you're too big, because that's what's ingrained in your brain. So I had to start challenging those things because he told me, he's like, the only way you're going to get past it is to walk through it. And he's like, when you look in the mirror, he's like, don't see the 400-pound you. He's like, look at the wrinkled skin, look at the sagging skin. He's like, you've lost it. He's like, when you think that you can't go between those two cars because you're too big, walk on through.
true.
So I've had to take a lot of that into account with my magical practices too. When you think you can't, try.
I think that's the great thing about witchcraft.
Hmm.
It's experimental by nature,
It is.
and you learn what works for you individually.
Hmm. I mean, think about it. Not everything fits everybody. I'm horrible at reading tarot cards. I'm horrible at it, but I can read bones. But
I get
as
over
far
that, though. I'm so like, no, not all witches read tarot cards.
no, I'm horrible at it.
No, I can
It
remember
doesn't come
reading.
naturally.
But 20 years ago, you didn't hear about the tarot cards in community the way you hear about them today.
Hmm. I
Once
mean,
they
trust
found
me.
out they could sell us tarot cards, we now have how many hundreds of different types of decks, because they
Hmm.
found out they can sell us tarot cards, where consumerism, capitalism came knocking on the door, and now we can have. And I'm thinking, 20, 30, 40 years ago, I don't remember tarot cards being this prominent.
Yeah, I remember hearing about them, but not anything like now. And
No.
it's just like with myself. I have people that I will let read for me because I trust them. I've had experience with them. I've got relationship with them. But as far as reading tarot cards for myself, forget it. Or for anybody else, I'm not going to put anybody through that trial and error.
We've at the Botanica in Florence, this old guy comes in and he's got a bag that he says it's just found items, and it's
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of little objects. From what I've gathered, there's probably about 30 in this bag he has.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll reach his hand in and grab a handful, and then he just drops it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, and the things that come out of this, it's one of those where there's a beer cap.
Mm-hmm.
It's found items. He's very realistic, but he divines. That's how
Mm-hmm.
he does divination, and he's really good. And watching the process and the whole thing, and when he does the readings, it is so cool. And that is more akin to what you would see within a folk magic, where you just pointed
Mm-hmm.
out reading bones, also
And it's very much the same
sticks.
process. It's just like I have a bag that has about 20 items in there. Some are bones, some are little mementos, things like that.
Oh, you got the same bag he
Yeah.
got.
And typically, if I'm working with somebody, I'll let them choose items that speak to them, and then I'll pick them up, throw them where they land in the tray. Tells me what I need to know, what the object is, helps me there. But it's
Yeah,
akin to the same thing.
that's what we had.
Hmm.
What we're talking about, old timers. We're sitting
Hmm.
here talking about, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow.
Oh yeah.
But how much the community has changed, and I think it's really nice and refreshing. I'll give the segue back over to your book, where we are getting back to those wonderful folk stories, those stories that magic at its finest is an oral tradition.
Hmm.
Witchcraft at its finest is an oral tradition. And you were able to take oral stories and put them on paper. Unfortunately, we all can't sit around the circle with you, Dave. Would love to, but I don't think we all can. And you were able to take those beautiful stories and put them on paper. And I would just like to say, I'm grateful that you did that. I'm looking forward to your next book,
Thank
because
you.
I'm like, oh, good stories. And I'm telling all of you other witches and other interesting magical beings, great book. Really, really a great book. If you're, like he was saying, that touch of folk magic, traditional magic, a little bit of that Southern Conjure Hoodoo magic, uh, and you give agency where agencies do. You are so respectful when you are speaking of other traditions. That was something else that I was just like, he's so good.
Thank you.
And with that said, I want to thank you for joining me. It was so wonderful to talk with you. Of course, witches and other interesting magical beings. If you would like to know more about me, please go to houseofwitchcraft.com. And don't forget, the first Thursday of every month is when we do an open community chat where anybody can come, press the link, and you can come chat with me and some other members of the House of Witchcraft. And with that said, get out there, fly those brooms, have a bright, blessed day. And as always, amen, blessed be, ashe, and avavo.